Shalom and welcome to this week's Living Torah. Before I get here, real quickly, a couple of announcements. Number one, I will be in Mannheim, Pennsylvania. Not this Shabbat, but the next Shabbat, the last Shabbat of August. It's August already. How is that happening? And so I did not post that on my itinerary. I'm not really posting my itinerary anymore on my website. I just don't feel like it's a good thing to just kind of put everything out there all over the place. So if you'd like information on that, please let us know. They are going to be catering one of the meals there, so we do need to have a count. I had a couple of people that had said to me at Revive that they might be able to go over there. So if you're able to, please let us know so we can get a good head count. The other thing is, as I've announced before, Hanok Young will be here in Franklin. I'll actually be picking him up from Atlanta Airport. Oh, wonderful. I get to go to Atlanta again. I'll be picking him up from Atlanta on Monday. We'll spend a few days together, and he will be at Life Assembly next Shabbat. Expecting a great time there. So if you'd like information, please just send me an email, let me know. A couple of things on more of a somber note. Many of you have probably seen on Facebook or various places that Rico Cortez, colleague and very respected teacher in this walk, lost his daughter-in-law. She passed away just this past week, leaving behind a very young child, little Rico's daughter. And so prayers for Rico, for both of them, and Yolanda for the family. Also, for some of you have been around for a while, and you've heard me talk about my cousin Ann, who lives in North Florida. She is really. I don't have a lot of family. Being an only child, you just don't have a lot of people all over the place. So Ann is on the top of my cousin list, and really one of the only ones that I keep in contact with these days. But she lost her grandson the other day in Alabama. She will be traveling over to Alabama to be there for the funeral and memorial service. Not even sure what they're doing. I'm not able to make it. So if you just have a moment of prayer time for both Rico, for the Cortez family, for Ann, and as I am around, I see so many people going through struggles today, things that we never thought possible, and it's a great time to be looking for people. If you see somebody post something on the internet, and you just got to get a thought, maybe send them a message. Want to know if there's anything I can pray with you about. We all have things that we're going through in life, and I don't expect it to get much better. In fact, I don't feel like it's going to get any better. Be mindful. I will give this comment. Be mindful of where you give funds to. We have a lot of, the fires in Maui. Kathy and I have been watching this. We were in Maui. We were privileged to go there. A paid trip to Maui 4 years ago now. We've been there. We've been in those shops. I've stood under that huge tree and had a wonderful experience there. But there's a lot of people out there that are tugging at your heartstrings. Could we say that in a cliche there? And trying to bring folks' emotions to open your wallet. Be very, very careful in this day. As someone who went through a tornado, I know that a lot of these agencies out there, they're not real mindful of where your money goes. It's some of them are just flat out, in my opinion, scams. Some of them do some good work, but the money that's wasted along the way. So my counsel to people is this: yes, we should be giving. Yes, we should be giving to people's needs. We should be helping people, but we should be very much discerning of where we give to. And that, I guess that takes us a little bit, a pretty good segue, I would imagine, I think, to this week's Torah portion, which is Judges. And we start in Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 16, verse 18. You are to appoint judges and officers for all your gates in the cities. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your Elohim is giving you tribe by tribe. You are to judge the people with righteous judgment. The word judge is not, these are not tricks, okay? These are not words that are, we go from English to Hebrew and find out that it has a really different meaning, which is, by the way, stay tuned. I'm going to talk about that in just a little while, of how a changing of a word can bring forth a destructive attitude for our lives. And so that'll be in just a few moments. But the words judges, officers here, these are not tricks. A judge, what is a judge? In our society, I'm speaking specifically of the United States, a judge, we know that we see the, what is it called? I can't even remember what the word is, but you get a judge based upon what you believe their political affiliation is, and you know that you're going to get an outcome, because it really doesn't matter what the letter of the law says. They are going to pass their judgment based upon their opinion. Supreme Court, you got this many that are so-called right wing, this many that are so-called left wing, and so you know who's going to. It doesn't matter. I can tell you most of the time. I can tell you what the judgment is going to be before it ever gets there. Because people are not judging with righteousness, but they're judging based upon their own opinions. So a judge is one who is to discern what the law says. Wow, not just in society, but wouldn't it be great to have that in this Hebraic roots, whatever it is, walk today? That we had people that would be raised up, that could be like a court, that we could have a ruling of, okay, this is what the Torah says, and we put it forth, and then we have faith in those people to give us a righteous ruling. But the truth is, we don't have that. And it goes all the way back to the book of Genesis, of Bereshit, in which when Yaakov, was giving those prophecies over his 12 boys, what does he say regarding Dan? Of Dan, he said, I wait for your deliverance. So we understand that the word Dan means judge or to judge, but Dan was the first tribe. Dan was actually located in the area which is present-day Gaza. And because they would not fight against the inhabitants of that land, which goes, by the way, to Goliath, they decided to go to a different land. They went up to what is now Tel Dan, and would be the first tribe assimilated into the nations. They would be the first tribe to walk into exile. So we see that Jacob is actually praying for the restoration. I wait for your deliverance. He was praying for the restoration of Dan. So what do we have today? We have these prophetic pictures that are being walked out in our midst. And if we go to the gates of the New Jerusalem, when we go to Ezekiel, we find in various places that Dan is not there, but then Dan will be restored. This is a great time to enter into that same prayer that Yaakov prayed in Bereshit and Genesis, that Dan would be restored, because we need those who will judge what is right and what is wrong. And then there are officers. What's an officer? It's one who oversees the carrying out of those laws. Wow, it sounds like kind of a model society, doesn't it? It sounds a little bit like Andy of Mayberry, where you actually had righteous rulings. At least that's what was on the television program. But you had judges that were judging righteously. You had Andy, who was trying to take care of Barney, who was, well, known for showing not the best discernment. How did I get to that point, and how do I get out of there? Here, I'll go back to the word. That'll do it. So these judges and officers are to do their job based upon not showing favoritism or accepting a bribe. Now, let me ask you, in the United States today, if we were to be able somehow to take out every judge, every sheriff, every police officer, every state trooper, every politician, every pastor, oh, I'll even throw that one in there, that is not judging based upon the Torah principles of not showing favoritism and not taking a bribe. If we were able to do that, how many judges, how many politicians, how many pastors would we have? How many police officers would we have? I know of a county very close to me that if you're from there, I mean, not just living there, but if you're from there, it's a whole different set of rules. I pastored a congregation in North Florida that if you were from there, it was a whole different set of rules. Yeah, that's called going against the Torah. So we need to be a people that, though the society and the system around us may be corrupt, may be absolutely, totally and completely unjust, but we in our own judgments, we in our own carrying out of the laws that we see, the Torah, we in our own relationships, we in our own congregations should be attempting with everything we have to uphold these principles. That someone walks in our congregation, I'll give you an example. Someone walks in our congregation and you happen to know that they give more than anybody else. Is the leader likely to kind of maybe brush over some things, gloss over some things? Well, let's. I mean, I know what and this happens, folks. This happens in not only in churches. This happens in Messianic congregations. That people are held to a different accountability, sometimes based upon their status in the community and their status of their wallet. It just happens. So let's be a people that make sure that it doesn't happen with us. Because in the end, that's the only one that I have any sometimes any control over, all right? I'm not saying that I totally have control over me all the time, but I'm trying to. But I don't have control over someone else. And in the end, I was thinking about this early this morning. Regarding this teaching and all the teachings that I do, I will be judged. As the book of Yaakov, James says, I will be doubly judged. I take what I do, the things that I say, I take it very seriously. Because I know that I will be held accountable at a different level for the things that I say, for the things that I teach. But I also am free of, I try to be free of this, that I will not be held accountable for what you do with it. I cannot be held accountable for what someone else does. When someone else goes against the clear words of Scripture, teachings, I can't be held accountable for that. I can only be held accountable for the influence that I have in their lives. In the end, people are going to do what people want to do. And so if ever, and this is one of those things of ministry that I've been in this field, this job for a long time, And at first, it was really difficult because I would sit down and counsel with people. They'd come to service. We'd spend time together, and then they'd walk off and go somewhere totally different. And I took it personal. There came a time in which I had to free myself of that. That people will do what people are going to do, and all I can do is be there for them during the time they're making choices and even afterwards. Okay, so let me go on from there. The word again, we're in chapter 16, verse 20. Justice, only justice will you pursue. The word here for justice is not a good translation. And again, we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. But it is the word zadik. You might know that is righteous, a zadikim, a righteous one. So it is more declared as righteousness, or zadik, are you to pursue? The word is, there's actually a great a great definition of this in Strong's, and it is to dog. All right, that's a good Southern term, I think it is. To dog, you're going to dog somebody. It's like a dog chasing someone. They just don't give up until they grab a hold. We are to be like that regarding this thing of righteousness. But what is righteousness? I was introducing to some folks this past Shabbat the idea of the Paleo-Hebrew, the pictograms of Hebrew. Most of you are associated with that. But the word zadik is a zadi, a dalit, and a kof. And if we're to put that together into a picture, the zadi is in Paleo Hebrew looked like a man laying down. All right. Now, what is the connotation that we bring forth when you're laying down? Okay. You normally, unless you're under a car and doing something which I got to do tomorrow with an oil change, but when you're laying down, you're normally at rest. You're normally not working when you're laying down. The dalit is a tent door, and just give me a little license here to consider that this is like a man who is laying down inside a tent and is looking through a door. Well, we understand that the Father invites us into his house. And so we are to come into his house and rest. And then that kof is like the sun which is coming up on the horizon. So is it the rising sun or is it the setting sun? Paleo Hebrew does not, you don't get a differentiation between those two. So we could look at it in two different ways. That the word zadik is a person that has come to a place of resting. They are resting inside of the Father's house, and they gaze at the horizon. The horizon can be when the sun rises, which is about the work that we're going to be doing, our dreams, our goals for the day. And I don't approach those dreams and goals with stress, or I shouldn't. Okay, we don't approach those with stress, but resting. That whatever we do, we're doing so while in His protective house. The sun setting on the horizon is about the time of our evening, that restful time in which we can sit down and hopefully enjoy and consider the fruits of our labors of that day. So this word zadik is going to go to another word we're going to talk about in just a few moments, of a man resting. Now, I got a little bit before I get to that point, and that is in verse 21 of the same chapter. You're not to plant any sort of tree or sacred pole beside the altar of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Elohim that you will make for yourself. This is the verse that is used to say that there would be no trees on the Harabite, the Temple Mount. When we go there today, we see the Dome of the Rock, we see the Al-Aqsa Mosque, we see trees that have been planted. During the time of the temple, the time of Messiah, there were no trees planted on the Temple Mount. And why is that? The thought, at least my thought, is that the Temple Mount was to have one focal point, and that was to be his house. That there was to be nothing there that could distract. So you would not plant, though it would be beautiful, but you were not to plant like a rose garden around the temple. Why? Because when you were walking up to the temple with your sacrifice, your total, complete focus was to be upon the Almighty, to be upon his dwelling place, to be upon that which he has given to us as a place of worship and adoration of him. And so if we had that rose garden, it would be our natural human tendencies to become distracted, go over and start to smell the roses instead of focusing on him. So I believe that in the next temple, whenever it is built, going into the temple of Ezekiel, the millennial temple, that there will not be, wherever, however that is, there will be no distractions. When we enter that place, it will just be that we will be focusing on him. Now, moving on, it says, and I mean, doesn't he know us? He's speaking through Moshe to the people, to the Hebrews. Moshe is not going to be entering in the land. The people are going to be entering in the land, and he's already got them pegged. He already knows what they're going to do going in before they ever go in. And as Moshe, I think as Moshe is bringing forth some of these words under the inspiration of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, that he's probably going like, wait a minute, where did could I come back to that in just a moment? He had to move on. But it says that when you enter the land, and instead of doing things the way that I want you to do, you start looking for a king. And then he tells the people of the qualifications for that king. And they're probably, anybody is probably going, wait a minute. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do as the other nations. We're not going to do what we did in Egypt and what our ancestors did in Egypt. We're not going to set up a Pharaoh and all. Oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. And what is it? A king would be instead of, again, focusing on him. Well, I need a man. I need a man here. So, let me give it to you like terms that we're entering into this time period. If only blank were elected. Okay, I didn't say who the blank is. Okay, I didn't say. Yeah, I did just say that, didn't I? I didn't say any name in that blank, did I? No, I didn't put any name in there. So don't put a name in there for me, okay? But if only blank were elected. You know what that I say this gently. That statement says, in essence, I'm still looking for a man to fix this. Instead of, if only the Almighty were to establish his reign. You've heard me say it many times. I heard another teacher say it the other day. There's no political solution to a spiritual problem. If you watch what's the news is today, folks, we have a spiritual problem in this country, in this world, and there's not a single man. If you see a man coming to power that has all the answers, be careful. Be careful, because there will be many. There will be the majority who fall for the one who is referred to as the pseudo-Messiah and not the Messiah. How do we know who the Messiah is? How do we know who the true Messiah is? Well, it's in verse 18 that when he occupies his throne, he is to write a copy of the Torah in his own handwriting. What does that mean to us? Was the king supposed to do that? Yes. So if Yeshua is the king, and I believe that he will be in his return, I guess he did already. Now that I think about it, if he is the living word, then he gave us the written word. So every week that we open the word, we are reading the copy that he wrote, or wrote through the hands of man under his own inspiration. So if it doesn't line up, if the life of if only blank was elected, does not line up with the Torah, then they're not to be followed. We are not to give of ourselves unto them. And in verse 20, he gives us another little clue into the life of the one worth following, so that he will not think he is better than his kinsman. There is a standard. There is an insight into the person that is following the Messiah, a person that is worthy of being followed. And yes, I believe that there are, we're to follow Messiah. Yeah, I got that. And you post something on Facebook and people go crazy. But, Shaul said, follow me as I follow Messiah. There it is. It's not that we take everybody else out of the line, but we are to follow others as we see. The picture was given to me years ago that a person that I decide to follow, and this is true in teachers, this is true in leaders that I look to, can I see Messiah through you? If, as I'm following you, if I were to look over your shoulder ahead of you, will I see a clear picture of the Messiah? Or will I have to look for him somewhere? So if I cannot see Messiah over your shoulder, then why should I be following you? It would be like, Kathy and I did some hiking in Alaska years ago, and in a hike there were many places up there that you would actually get a guide to take you, and you could do this in India or wherever it is, but you get a guide to take you somewhere. In that you have a number of people that are going along on this hike. You're not up there in the front, because if you're going to be on a hike with me, you're not going to be in the front. I'm going to be the lead dog. It's just part of my personality, folks. In fact, I'm going to be probably trying to figure out how to become the tour leader, as I do in Israel. I'm not going to be in the back of the pack. So, but if I'm, somewhere behind for some reason, what am I going to do? I'm going to be following the person ahead of me, who is following the person ahead of them, who is following the person ahead of them, but I'm going to be at some point in time trying to look over their shoulder around them to make sure that they're following the one who knows how to get to the destination. And if I can't see that, then I'm going to stop and start asking some questions. So a trait, an attribute of a godly leader is this: humility. Well, you can let your mind go wherever you want right there. The attribute that he says right here of a godly leader is going to be this: he will walk in humility. Yeshua is one who we see is walked in humility every single day of his life. Which means, in the end, I'm only looking for one king. I'm not looking for an earthly king. I'm not looking for a man who was born through natural causes to be my king. I'm looking for one who was born from a heavenly realm, and that is the one that I desire to pursue. It goes on, and we're in chapter 18, starting in verse, I'm going to be down to 10. There must not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through fire, a diviner, soothsayer, enchanter, sorcerer, spellcaster, a consulter of ghosts and spirits, because of these are abominations. I got in trouble many years ago. Well, that's a surprise to all of you. I got in trouble many years ago from people when, in raising our children, and we didn't do everything perfect, okay? I'm not trying to say that. But we had some standards in our house. Our children didn't watch Snow White. They were not allowed to watch The Wizard of Oz. Today, you got Harry Potter. You got horoscopes. You have, on television, you have all kinds of crazy things. Guys, let me just ask you a question. And I think I know the answer to this from those of you that I know out there. But is what is detestable to him detestable to us? Think about that. The word, King James says abomination. It's a good word. It's what it means. But I think detestable is something that is kind of speaks a little bit closer to home, for me at least. You see something. I'm not going to go into specifics in this society, but there's things that are happening around us that, yes, they're an abomination, and because they're an abomination, they are detestable to me. I know what people have gone through as a pastor. I carry a lot of secrets. There are things that I know that I can't tell anyone. This may be a difficult statement for some people. There's things that I know that my wife doesn't know, because this is part of being a pastor, is when someone tells you something in confidence, you're able to keep that in confidence. And so with that becomes a burden, not in a bad sense, okay, but it's something you carry. And there's things that happen in people's lives that are that make me sick. Absolutely make me sick. I don't have boxes for. Is what is detestable unto him also detestable unto us? I mean, take for instance, go over to the book of Isaiah, and it talks about the end of Isaiah. Look at the last few chapters. I think it's in 64, 65, 66. And it talks about that swine flesh is detestable unto him. For those of you that have kind of made this transformation into eating kosher, I know it tasted good, but is it like, I don't even want to walk by it. I don't want to walk by that section of the grocery store. Someone mentioned to me the other day that in this, not somebody that's in this walk, of course, but their wife had made shrimp bowls, and it's like there was a time in my life that I would have been salivating just over the words of a shrimp bowl. I mean, I could put a hurting on some fried shrimp, or whatever, pretty much any kind of shrimp there was. I can't stand to walk by that in the grocery store. Why? Because it's detestable. And so what is detestable to him should be detestable to us. Okay, I want to go into kind of my last, maybe my last thing here. In chapter 18, there is a verse, chapter 18, verse 13. And I know I've talked about this in the past. Okay, I got that. And for those of you that have been around for a while, maybe just, I tried to get away from this week, and I just could not get away from it. In fact, we had a lightning storm last night. We're blessed that in our place in North Carolina, we have a mountain range just to the west of us. It breaks down everything. But we got a show last night, and our dog Kaya lost about 2 pounds, probably just shaking. It was really bad. But weather, we just had some rain. But I woke up this morning after being awake a lot of the night, checking my phone just to make sure. But I woke up this morning with this just rolling around in my head. It says in chapter 18, verse 13, you must be, and David Stern translates it wholehearted with Yud-Heh Vav-Heh Yer Elohim. The King James translates this as perfect. You are to be perfect before him. I don't use King James. You might have noticed that. I don't use King James. People can use whatever they want. Okay? It's not my decision. But let me give you my reasoning for that. Is basically this: I don't speak in King James today. If I opened my my broadcasts, any of them with me speaking in thou and this'ns and thus'ns and all that kind of stuff, probably most of you you might still listen, you might still watch, but you'd be like, what is wrong with him? Okay, I don't pray in King James. I don't even sing in King James, for the most part. There are songs that are out there, beautiful songs that we sing and I love, but even in the midst of that, I find myself transforming the words into something that I understand. And why, it would be kind of like moving into a new house with a brand new kitchen, and you decide that you're just going to go out in the yard and build a fire. There are, you have a choice of getting a brand new car, and you decide to drive a Model T all the time as your daily driver. It may be cool to drive a Model T occasionally, but when I go to Pennsylvania, no thanks. No thanks. I want to drive something a little bit more modern that'll get me there a little bit faster. I've got a trip coming to Israel. I'm not going to Kitty Hawk to try to, recreate the Wright brothers plane. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Do I believe that the King James is evil? No. But I do believe that there were things about the Hebrew language that they didn't understand. The translators. I can go into the history of the King James Bible and I can show you some things about it. You can go online and find that out. King James was not the most righteous person in the world. And really put together this whole thing for himself. That's why it's called King James. And but with that being said, the Father uses people along the way, and I think he did this in order to make it into something for people to understand. But with that being said, these translators did not have, in my opinion, a very good knowledge of the Torah. They didn't have a real good knowledge of the prophets and the writings. They didn't have the Dead Sea Scrolls. They didn't have the resources that have been found over the last years. They didn't have a people who have resurrected the Hebrew language. And so there were things that were written that were maybe, when translated into our lives today, can mess with our minds. I'll put it like that. And maybe the biggest one is right here in this verse of King James translates it, you must be perfect. Well, guess what, folks? If that is the standard, you've heard me say this, if the standard today is perfection, turn the camera off. Close the book. Dissolve the ministry of Join to Hashem. Meet one more time with Life Assembly and tell them we're done. Call some friends up in Pennsylvania. I'm out of here. I'm sorry I can't come. Because if the standard is perfection, the one you're listening to right now does not meet that standard. There's not a day of my life that I have met that standard. If that surprises you, you don't know me very well. Are you going to read about me in the the newspapers or of some grave sin? No, not saying that. But the standard of perfection is something that I cannot achieve. Now, with that being said, the standard of perfection is upon my life, I believe, through the work of Messiah. Period. Let me go with that again. The standard of perfection has been, if you would, stamped upon my life, approved, inspected, called perfect, not because of me, but because of Him. And I trust in that on a daily basis. So how do we deal with this word? I think that David Stern did a pretty good job of it, of wholehearted. The word in Hebrew is tamim. This is a good word. If you even as I have in the Complete Jewish Bible, I have the word wholehearted underlined, but I have the word tamim written down beside it, just so I remind myself of the word, because the word is one of the most fascinating words in Scripture. If we go back to the first place that this word was used, it is regarding Noah. It is in Genesis, Bereshit chapter 6, verse 9, and it says that he was perfect. Well, if we follow his life, he wasn't. And I don't have to follow his life to know that, because I see that the genealogy of Noah goes to Adam, who gave away the perfection in the garden. So, where do we go with that? Noah was tamim. So let's look at the word for a moment. The word tamim is a tav, which is the mark of the covenant. Very important. It is the mark of the covenant. It is a mem, which is regarding water. It is a vav, a yod, which is a hand. It is a final mem. So the word tamim, tav, mem, yod, and final mem. What do we see with this word? It's very, very fascinating to me. The picture that it brings forth is that when it starts with the tav, it is about covenant. And of course, the ancient Paleo-Hebrew would have been a mark that looked like a stake. And so the letter of tav would always speak to us about the covenant. And the moment we speak about the covenant, we would then go back to Genesis, and the word spoken in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, the covenant spoken to Adam and Eve, or in the hearing of Adam and Eve through the speaking to the serpent, that basically says, Adam, Eve, what you have broken, I will fix. And I'm transliterating this, of course, but when he says, I will fix, he's literally speaking of, I will fix. Through the hanging upon an execution stake, the shedding of his own blood, not the shedding of the blood of an animal, but through the shedding of his own blood, he will fix that which man has broken. So the whole word is revolving around this of covenant. The mem is water, the yod is a hand, and the other mem is the final water. Let's liken it to a river. We have numerous rivers here. I have one just right outside of down the hill from me. A river has a beginning, and a river has a destination. We see that in the book of Job. And so no river that I know of is perfect. I've never seen a river that's perfect. What would a perfect river be? A perfect river would have a constant depth, would have a constant width, would have concrete on the sides to reduce the friction of the water or some similar substance. A perfect river would be absolutely straight with no obstructions along the way in order for that water to flow as freely as is possible. I think that we would call that a canal. Familiar with the one in Florida, the barge canal there at around Palatka area. I remember that being built. So this is a man-made structure. A natural river is not perfect. It has its twists. It has its turns. It has its obstructions. The river that we live next to, there was a tree that just fell down a few weeks ago and is laying down in the river. That's now an obstruction. There are rocks, there are boulders. There is the rising and the lowering of the river based upon the rain that we've gotten up in the mountains. So a river is constantly changing. A river is constantly moving. It goes around bends and curves, and you can see over time that those bends and curves will actually move, and that river might actually make a detour along the way, but it's going to come back to its original place. It's going to fork off, but it's going to come back because the river has a destination. And so this is about a person who, because of the covenant, jumps in the river, not knowing what the river is going to be in front of them, not knowing the obstacles that are going to be there, not knowing the rising, the falls, the rapids, the dangers that are going to be in front. All of those things are variables, but this person, because of their faith, they jump in their faith in the covenant, they jump in the river, and only to find that there's a hand, the yod, only to find that there's a hand that is guiding them along the way, that is never leaving them, never forsaking them, and is going to take them to the final destination of that river, which in this metaphor would be called the kingdom. So this person trusts in the hand. They trust in the hand all the way, and they never get out. They never say, well, we're going to take a break on the shore. We're going to take our raft, our kayak, and we're going to go over here, and we're going to find another way. No, I'm going to stay in the river, no matter what it looks like. That is the definition of a person who is tamim, who is wholehearted before him. That no matter what this life is, I have a destination, and I'm going to trust his hand to bring me from the place that I jumped in the river to the place in the end that is his kingdom. And we'll go on briefly in this Torah portion and talk about when you fight your enemies, Don't be afraid. And what did Yeshua tell us in Matthew chapter 10? I challenge you to read Matthew chapter 10, those verses of, specifically, I've got to stop this before it beeps. Okay, specifically the verses of verse 28 through verse 31. Do not fear, little flock. Do not fear. You ever want a great study? Look at this study in Scripture of do not fear. It says that doesn't he know the sparrows? He talks about it. He knows the hairs on our head. He says, don't fear that. Don't fear that which is able to destroy you physically, your flesh and bone, your flesh and blood, but fear the one who is able to cast you into Gehenna. Let me put it in terms of the river. Don't fear the things that are in the river. Fear the one who is able to take you out of the river and set you aside because you weren't trusting in the covenant. Hope I've given you something to think about. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov, have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing, see you again next week. Until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.